Good afternoon, Judge Gookin.
Good afternoon, everyone.
And welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Yes. Please be comfortable, and when you are ready, you may begin with your opening statement.
Well, I want to thank all of you. I'm assuming you're happy to see me, but not because it's me. I fully appreciate you've put in a long day, and again, I thank you for your service on this commission because it's so important. Because of that, and also because most of you have had the opportunity to interview me, now this being the third time, in 6 months, I haven't changed a whole lot over the last 6 months. My applications, I think you know, look about the same. And so as a result, what I'd like to do today in terms of opening remarks is try and be pretty brief and let you ask the questions that you want to ask and dig deeper into those things that you want to know about me in my application to the Iowa Court of Appeals. So there are 3 things I want to just briefly emphasize to you. This is nothing new for those of you that have heard me before and have interviewed with you. But there are 3 things that I think are very important that I want to briefly emphasize. Number 1, my experience. Number 2, my work ethic. Number 3, what I like to call my report card. And the first thing I want to talk about, the experience, is I think it's very important as a judge of the Iowa Court of Appeals that you have a real broad experience, not only in the law, but also in life, and I think I bring that to this position. I practiced law for 28 years in a general practice firm in Fairfield, Iowa. Because we're a general practice firm, I have seen pretty much all different areas of the law during that 28 years that I practiced that I think gives me a very good background and a good context to be an appellate judge. And in fact, I discovered that right after taking the bench as a district court judge. Immediately, I felt much more comfortable than I ever expected I would feel in going on the district court bench because I had experienced so much of what a district court judge has to do on a day-to-day basis in Iowa. I've been involved with a lot of state commissions and committees, served on committees of the Iowa Bar Association, served on Supreme Court commissions, chaired some of those commissions. I'm currently chairing the Client Security Commission. All of those things, I think, give me a broad base, not only in the practice of law, but in the law itself, to be a very fine judge of the Iowa Court of Appeals. That general practice also gave me a lot of experience in both trial and appellate work, as well as transactional work. I think that that's very important for any judge that's going to serve at the appellate level, and I'll be happy to talk to you more about that and drill into that a little deeper as we go forth with questions. Obviously, I think being a judge for 8 years on the Iowa District Court bench has really helped me prepare for this position on the Iowa Court of Appeals. An Iowa District Court judge, as I think most of you know, is kind of like being, or is the judicial equivalent of a general practitioner in the practice of law, because we're the court of general jurisdiction, and we say anything and everything any week that we're out there working. And as a result, again, I think that gives me a broad base to be able to handle all of the issues that would confront me as a judge of the Iowa Court of Appeals. Beyond that professional experience, I think I just have a lot of good life experience. Born and raised in Iowa, got 3 kids, gone through that. Have also served in a lot of commissions and committees that I've been involved in civically. I served on the Fairfield City Council for 14 years. I think that gave me a great experience to actually become a judge because it taught me that I have to answer when I make a decision to the people who elected me, and I have to give them a good reason for why I made the decision that I made. And I always tried to do that. That was one thing when I decided I was gonna run for city council. I wanted to always have an explanation, whether you liked the outcome of how I voted, that I had an explanation for you that made sense. You might not like the result, but at least you could understand why I did what I did. So I think all of those things give me a broad experience in the law and in life that would serve me well on the Iowa Court of Appeals. Secondly, and I guess it kind of goes with the first issue, I think I have a good work ethic. I've worked hard all of my life to do the things that I've been able to do. I fully understand that the Iowa Court of Appeals kicks out a lot of rulings, and they work very hard. I don't consider that a concern, maybe a challenge, but not a concern. I'm up to that. I can do that work. I don't think I would be able to present to you the kind of application that I have if I haven't proven that I'm a pretty hard worker, and I'm certainly willing to continue to work hard on the Iowa Court of Appeals. Lastly, I'd mentioned that report card. Those of you that previously were on the commission heard me talk about the 2018 Judicial Performance Evaluation that the Iowa State Bar Association does whenever there are judges up for a retention election. In 2018, I was very proud to receive a 100% retention rating from the attorneys that practiced before me. If you look on paragraph 29, page 18 of my application, you'll see the scores that the attorneys gave to me as a part of that judicial evaluation. I consider them to be very high scores. I'm very proud of that. That's not something I think any judge is always looking out there, boy, if I can just get that 100% rating the next time we have a retention election. It's just a function of trying to be patient with people, patient with lawyers, to be fair, to be impartial. Yes, to be kind to people when they're in your courtroom. You have to be able to control your courtroom, and sometimes you've got to be firm, but it's also important to be kind to people. So those three things, my experience, which I think is very broad, my work ethic, and I think hopefully would be considered a straight A report card, I think suit me well to be a judge on the Iowa Court of Appeals. So I would formally request that you nominate me to the governor to serve on the Iowa Court of Appeals, and I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Judge Gookin. And we will begin with questions with Mr. Horbach.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. This is just an observation. You seem very comfortable explaining things to us, just as you are to litigants in your courtroom. How comfortable are you at the Court of Appeals where your explanation is a writing?
Well, we do a lot of writings as district court judges too. I will say this, the thing that probably would be, I don't want to call it a challenge necessarily, but a change. As a district court judge, when I sit as the fact finder and I have to write my ruling, my findings of fact, conclusions of law, analysis, and ruling, it's just me. I get to make the decision. Serving on the Court of Appeals, I have other people that I have to answer to and that I have to persuade and that I have to tell them why I believe this is the way we should decide a case. That's going to be something that's new to me in terms of the legal practice and being a district court judge, but it's not new to me because of 14 years on the Fairfield City Council. There were 7 of us, and you know, we didn't always have unanimous decisions either, but I worked with other people to be able to reach consensus to get the best possible decision that we could get. And I would do the same as a judge on the Iowa Court of Appeals, working with the other judges to reach consensus as required by the law, and I feel comfortable with that.
Thank you.
Mr. Bevel.
Thank you. Judge, most decisions you tell somebody no. How are you able to do that and people still like you?
Well, I'm not sure they do,
I'm not
but
but not only like, but respects your parent clearly. And what part of that would transfer to your work at the Court of Appeals?
You know, there's no magic formula as far as I'm concerned, other than just being respectful and good to other people, to treat them with the respect that they deserve. When any litigant comes into the courtroom, whether they're represented or not, this is a big deal for them. And they have, I think they deserve to be treated with respect. And as a result, I try and do that. And yes, sometimes I have to say no, and in fact, most of the time, somebody goes away from the court being unhappy. But again, my goal has always been, I'm not going to make everybody happy. This is not a job to be in to make people happy. But if I can at least explain why I have reached my decision, and most of the time that's in writing, you know, we don't necessarily do it from the bench. But I try to explain to the best of my ability why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I think that resonates with most people. Even if they go away and didn't get the relief that they wanted, if they understood why I did what I did, I think they can at least feel like the system worked for them, that they were heard. And how that equates to the Iowa Court of Appeals is the very same thing. I think we want to, obviously, we're bound by the law in our decisions, but we need to write our rulings in a manner that is clear, that people understand what we have decided, and that they can walk away from it, perhaps not necessarily being happy with the outcome, but understanding the outcome that they received.
Mrs. Sinclair?
No questions.
Ms. Valentine?
Thank you. Judge, you mentioned in your application that the court must do everything in its power to earn the respect and trust of the people of Iowa. Tell me how you would do that, or what the court needs to do to earn that trust.
I think it goes back kind of to what I discussed with Mr. Bevel's question, is the people that appear before us, which of course is a Court of Appeals or lawyers at oral argument, I think they deserve our respect. But the people who we are affecting, the litigants in this process, again, I think a written ruling with clarity and understanding is important for people to respect the judicial branch. I think also our public demeanor, and I understand that we may not be necessarily out there for everyone to observe at all times, but I told a story, I think, to Ms. Stanger about the fact that after I became a judge, I'm at McDonald's, and this lady turns around and she's got what appears to be her grandchild in her hands, and she said, "Are you the new judge?" And I said, "Well, yes." I didn't know this lady. And she looked down at her granddaughter and said, "Would you like to shake a judge's hand?" And so it was quite an experience. I shook this little girl's hand, and you know, people respect the law. They respect what we do, whether you're a lawyer or a judge. And I think your public demeanor has to be such that people will respect the institution of justice and the institution of this judicial branch. So that's how I think you should live your life, and that's how I would try and continue to live mine.
Thank you.
Mr. Berger?
No question.
Ms. Stanger?
Thank you. I did tell my daughter that story, though, about McDonald's. Saying, "Look out, you may have a judge watching over you." But no, I think what we had talked about is that judges are people too, right?
Right.
Those concepts. And I want to get at that with a little bit of some factors that our commission's been asked to consider. And that is, you know, geographic diversity and diversity of law practice, you know, bringing credibility to the Court of Appeals through those sorts of areas. What are your thoughts on geographic diversity and practice diversity, and what do you bring in those areas that would be strengths for this commission to consider?
Well, I think practice diversity is very important, as I initially indicated. It gives you a very broad background so that when a case comes to you, anyway, this has been my experience at the district court, you have a context for it, that you're not, oh my gosh, I've never dealt with this kind of thing before. So I think the practice diversity and the experience within the legal community is important for a judge on the Iowa Court of Appeals. I think geographic diversity is important too, again, for the purpose that we need to be sensitive to the fact that the public doesn't always understand what we do, and we need to make ourselves available to put, the flesh out there and shake the hand so that they can understand who we are and what we do. I would say if I'm chosen, I will continue to have my office in Fairfield, Iowa, because I think it's important that people can know that this judge of the Iowa Court of Appeals thinks it's important enough to remain in his community. I think we also need to get out, and to the extent that we can, we need to be meeting people and explaining what we do so that they can have a better understanding for how the judiciary works. And I would support that 100% and would provide any kind of help I can to the court in seeing that that's accomplished.
Thank you.
Ms. Pearson?
No question.
Mr. Gray?
I have no new question.
You mentioned in your application that you enjoyed your private practice very much and you really struggled with the decision to apply for the bench the first time. What tipped the scale and made you apply?
I think because I've always been a person that likes to be involved and likes to serve, and I'd been an advocate for 28 years. And honestly, again, I'll go back to my city council experience. I liked being a decision maker. I discovered that I liked doing that, and I thought I was pretty good at it. And so, although I had, throughout the course of my private practice career, considered the possibility of going on the bench, of applying for it, I did. I had a great law office, and I had wonderful people to work with, and it was a difficult decision for me. But eventually, I decided, I think I want to try and be the decision maker. And that was the primary reason why I decided to apply for the district court bench.
Thank you.
Mr. Goodman?
Judge, thank you for your application. One of the things that I struggle with is not the rural-urban issue or representation on the court. I think that's a very valid concern. But when we start to look beyond our charge of selecting the most qualified candidates, we sometimes run into, well, this judge is from Fairfield, and there's one on the Court of Appeals that's from Washington, and those are pretty close. And
Right.
we could go over here, and we're up here, and we balance it out better. I'd like you to comment on what role you think geography should play as opposed to a mix of smaller and larger towns on the Court of Appeals.
Let me address the Washington-Fairfield issue. I'm not so sure it makes a lot of difference how far apart you are. You're never going to be able to get candidates that can give you perfect geographic diversity throughout the state. This is not going to happen. And so I don't know that it's so important that there's a long or short distance between where judges may have their chambers. But I think it's important that there is a diversity between urban and rural. As a result, I think it's good to have judges from Des Moines, Cedar Rapids, the more urban areas, but I think it's also very important to have judges from the Washingtons and the Fairfields and wherever, the smaller communities. I think we have our finger on a different pulse by being in rural areas versus being in urban areas. Both are extremely important, but again, our job isn't necessarily to decide the way our neighbors want us to decide. Our job is to apply the law. But I still think it's important to have that kind of diversity on the court.
Thank you for your answer.
Well, thank you, Judge Gookin, and we are out of time for today. We certainly appreciate you being here with us, and we wish you well.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.